So this is our workflow dashboard, and you can see I have some existing ones, but today we're really going to focus on creating a new one. So I'm going to create workflow here. And there are several ways that you can get your workflow started with a document, without a document. Today, I'm specifically going to use a template, which there's a lot of benefits to doing, and you're going to see pretty much now. I'm going to start with one. So start with documents. And you can see one thing that Anvil did automatically was it showed me my PDF on the right, and then it automatically created a web form for me on the left based on the fields that I set up in my PDF template. So the great thing is a lot of this work is done for me. I don't have to manually map these fields one by one. I don't have to create these fields one by one because I spent that upfront time on my template. One thing you might notice on the template over here is that there's a lot of green boxes with these little connected plugged in icons, and then there's a few that are blue and they don't have this icon. What this means is there is a connected web form field that's outputting data onto my PDF field, and the blue ones are not yet connected. This is really great. This calls back to a little bit about what Sophie was saying, how you can use one piece of information over and over again. In this current example, I only have one PDF. But let's say I have 5 and they all need a name field, rather than filling out a name field 5 times like you would if you were filling out traditional PDFs or traditional paperwork. You only have to fill it out once, and then it can be mapped to all 5 of your fields to save your user time. So we're going to focus specifically on how you can build this really great UX on your web form, especially now that all these fields have been generated for me. So one quick thing, if you look at it, there's a lot of categories that fall under maybe somebody's basic information, like their name, their address, date of birth. And then there's some other questions down here that relate specifically to your citizenship status in the US. And so I would like to break this up into 2 separate pages on my web form, and I can quickly do that by adding in a page break here. And as you can see, this is now page 2, and this is page 1. Something else that you might want to spend some time with up front is your field types. Anvil's great. We offer a lot of different type of fields, and it's great for field validation. It's for quick formatting. It's for making sure that things are inputted the correct way and the correct data type. In the example of a name field and another name field, you can see this one's a short text field specifically, and this one is a name field. And what that does with a name field is it has the first name, middle initial, and last name all in one row, versus if I chose to use other name field like this one, everything is short text, I'd have to have 4 separate fields, one for my first name, one for my middle, one for my last, and one for another name. Setting up your right field types is really great in that it can collapse information like this for your users, making it a lot more streamlined. It also offers things like field validation for like US address or date of birth. You can choose if you want a date dropdown or if you want a calendar picker. In my example here, social security number is a short text field. We can actually choose a social security field type. And as you can see, there is some placeholder information filled in for me. And what it'll also do on the PDF is format it correctly. So it's 3 digits, 2 digits, and 4 digits. That's a really great place to start your basic setup of your web form to make sure everything is the correct field if it wasn't already configured on your PDF template. Another thing is you might want to change the titles, which is simple, but is a really good UX experience. Rather than seeing something like I-9 paper version, you can say personal information, which really comes in handy when you have multiple pages. Like my next page, rather than being new page, you can specifically say this is citizenship details. And taking it a step further, you can also add explanation text. So you can add instructions in here, embedding it rather than on a PDF where you'd have to read, start here. If you need more information, go on to page 3. All of that can be baked into your web form. And you can even add personal touches. This would technically be my employee onboarding. So I want to name it as such. And you might want to add a fun message, and it also supports Markdown. So in bold, I want to say, welcome to the team. And we also support things like emojis here. So you can really personalize what you say to your users, your end users on this form, and streamline the experience for them. There could be instructions here. Please fill out the questions and let a team member know when you're done, or if you have questions. Anvil will let them know when you're done. All right, so those are just some really basic things on how you can personalize it and streamline it. But another thing, oops, like just now, you could see if you move on and you look at the page details, it added a page directly underneath my first page because that's where I chose to add a page. And I can reorder that so it makes more sense. So when you're going through your workflow, you can see, oh, it starts on the first page, employee onboarding, moves on logically. Speaking of logic, one other thing you might want to consider, looking at my PDF here, there is something here called USCIS number, and I don't need to ask this for every single citizenship type. For example, citizen, non-citizen, permanent resident. I only want to ask it if you are a permanent resident or if you are a non-citizen authorized to work. Keeping questions relevant to the user, you can add logic to an individual field, to pages, to a PDF page, to make sure your user is only ever asking questions that make sense to them. Field logic is really easy to add. You can click on the field and add a condition, and you can choose which field you want to base it off of. So this is available to non-citizens, is checked, then I will show this field. You can also add additional conditions. So this one is also relevant to the non-citizens authorized to work. So I can pick that out. And you can see earlier, any subsequent conditions after the first one can be added as and or statements. For this one, I'm specifically picking or because you can pick either or. And then you can also test this logic. So if you click on this play button, it will go into test mode, and you can see there's no USCIS number available now because nothing is checked. And the same thing applies, like if you check US citizen, you check non-citizen, it'll pop up. If you click permanent resident, it will, sorry, the other one, it will also pop up, non-citizen authorized to work. So that's one way that you can check if the logic makes sense for your user. Now, another thing that you want to do perhaps is connect signers. Before I do that, I'm going to show you really quickly how you can easily add another document. Let's say you're building a workflow and you think, oh, I forgot an employee document. You can quickly go in and add a new one. So I'm going to actually add in a background check. And I can reuse that piece of information on here. So that name field you can see can also be connected from my web form field, and that connects everything up very, very quickly. Other name field also available. Now I'm going to set up the signatures, which I can reuse on both documents as well. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add an employee. And the great thing about Anvil here is you can set up signatures dynamically. So rather than having to put in Sophie is signing, here's Sophie's email, or Amy is signing, here's Amy's name, and here's Amy's email, you can choose whoever's filling out this web form, I want to capture that name, and I want to capture that email, and that person is going to now be the employee who is signing. So I'm going to save that, and you can add it to other fields like your signature date. So I'm going to multi-select all of these at once, and I'm going to choose to reuse my primary signer, who is the employee. And the same thing can happen over here. Select all of these, and just like that, my signers are set up. Now, some things that you might want to iterate on as well as adding in any additional questions. For example, like here, years used for other names wasn't asked on my first form. This is something that you can very easily add later on. So this goes back to thinking about your web form logically. You're not just filling out individual PDFs one at a time. You're trying to think about the collective experience that your end user is going to have and how that information fits into where. So if I want to add here, oops, not a logic, I want to add in how many years have you used this name? And this really only pops up, and I want this to be a number type because I don't want them to put in words. You can change your validation, and you can also add in logic. So I only want this question to show up if somebody has filled in another name. So we're going to choose other name equals, oops, no, we're just going to go with filled. Perfect. And then again, you can test this as you're building it out. If you don't fill it in, nothing will show up. If you fill something in, something will show up. So that is how it works. So right now I'm going to say this is good to go. I want to save this for now and save and exit. For the sake of time, I've already filled out a form, so I can show you if you go back to it. Oops, sorry, I want to publish it. Let's go to your settings, publish it. As Sophie said, you can do V1. Basic setup is what I'm going to name this one. I'm going to publish it now. And here is where you could launch a full test submission and test everything end to end. So I have one filled out here, which I'm going to click on. So you can see everything is filled in, personal name, all this detail is in here. And then onto the next page, everything's been filled out. This one, by the way, is a little bit more cleaned up, so you can spend more time to make it even cleaner for your users. So I'm going to review, and you can see all their information filled out here. You can also edit the information as you're filling out, and then you can finish and submit, and review and sign. And once a person has reviewed and signed, They can see everything plugged into their document, and you can choose to click into the signatures one by one or sign all of them. And that is a cleaned up user experience. Now going back to I'm a person using admin as an admin on Anvil, I want to see the final paper as well. You can see it on their file output, and you can see this one filled out both the I-9 as well as the background check. And if you notice something's wrong with it, like, hey, I realized I have some issues with my I-9, my social security wasn't hooked up here properly. Maybe you hooked it up properly in the past or you want to in the future. You can go to your settings and you can go to your version history and you can see version 4, 3, 2, 1, along with any notes I added. And as you can click on them, you can see what fields changed and where. And you can also choose to edit the version information so you can update those notes, or you can revert to this version as well.